is Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton and the author of the brand new book, Only the Strong. Senator, welcome back. All right, so you are a veteran. We've talked to a lot of veterans who are running for Congress this year. As we discussed in the last segment, you devoted an entire chapter in your book called Neutering the Military, where you call out Democrats for their policies. How important is it that we elect more veterans in Congress? Is that the solution?
I think Congress could use a lot more veterans. I think we're going to get more veterans as my generation of troops gets into our 40s and our 50s, when it's more typical to start running for Congress. I think that'd be a good thing. It's always good to have that kind of frontline experience and to understand the point of view of a private or a sergeant or a lieutenant, not just the point of view of generals in the Pentagon.
All right, so you've been traveling around the country. You've done campaign stops in Ohio for J.D. Vance. You've been in Georgia for Herschel Walker. You were in Pennsylvania for Dr. Oz. These are obviously the key pivotal states. Tell me, based on what you've seen so far, how do you see things playing out?
Oh, I'm very confident we're going to win the House and the Senate next week. I don't want to hazard an exact number, but I'm going to say I think it'll be a comfortable majority in both, because the American people want to put the brakes on the Democrats' radical ideology. The American people have a great deal of common sense. They're very sensible and practical about the problems we face. They're not ideologues, unlike Joe Biden and the Democrats in Washington. That's why they're going to repudiate the ideological approach of the last 2 years and elect Republicans who are dedicated to common sense solutions, like getting control of our borders, stopping the runaway spending that is driving this inflation, recognizing that we should produce our own oil and gas and coal rather than go hat in hand to dictatorships like Venezuela or Iran, and that we finally have to take a stand against China if we want to continue to live in a free and stable world.
Okay, I know you said you didn't want to put a number on it, but your colleague in the Senate, Senator Rick Scott, the chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, he says that Republicans will have at least 52-seat majority in the Senate. I mean, is that what you're seeing when you're out there, when you're campaigning with these people? Do you think that'll be the margin?
Lindsay, I'll tell you what, I'm going to be in Nevada later this week campaigning with Adam Laxalt. And in the spirit of the battle-born state, if 52 is the over-under line, I'll bet the over.
All right. Listen, let me ask you this. From what you're seeing, if you had to give advice to people in the last 7 days, tell them to lean more into one issue or one message. You've got, obviously immigration, crime, inflation out there. What's your advice based on what you're seeing on the ground?
Well, unfortunately, we've had so many setbacks over the last 2 years since Joe Biden took office. There's too many issues probably to focus on just in 1 week. But I think most Americans are badly desiring into this inflation. So many people have trouble feeding their families, filling up their tanks, paying their bills at the end of the month. So many families are struggling. Second, the quality of life in our communities, from rising crime to a drug death epidemic, to schools that are not teaching kids reading, writing, and arithmetic while they are indoctrinating them with these ideologies. I would focus on simple quality of life issues. Those are going to be important whether you're in a deep red state like Ohio or a more democratic state like Washington or Colorado.
Something I think has been interesting is we've seen a diverse pool of candidates for Republicans. How important is that as we kind of see the Republican Party change?
We have a lot of great recruits in the Senate, and then, as always, many more in the House just because of the numbers. I've gotten to know a lot of these recruits in the House through my Veterans to Victory program, as we were talking about earlier. I think it's a great thing to have more veterans in Congress. And I think having more representatives and more senators who have different perspectives on life, people who have served in the military, like J.D. Vance, people who have been in business, like Blake Masters, people who have been veterans advocates, like Tiffany Smiley in Washington State, or heart surgeons, like Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania, brings necessary and useful knowledge into the Congress and helps us all work better together when we have those kind of diverse perspectives and knowledge bases.
Senator Tom Cotton, I want to thank you for coming back on the show. Congratulations on the new book, Only the Strong. I hope it rockets up the chart. It's a must read for everybody, especially as you guys get ready to take the majority. It gives everyone a sense of what's at stake and why it's so important.
Thank you both. I appreciate you having me on.
It is our pleasure to welcome back to the show Senator Tom Cotton. Good to see you, sir.
Hey, Sean, good to be back on with you. Thanks for having me on to talk about Only the Strong.
Yeah, congratulations to the book. It's a great read. Enjoyed it. I love the case you're making. Tell me if I'm wrong. My takeaway is that America recently is facing this decline. It's not an accident. It is by design. It's by design of the left. You think that's a fair takeaway from the book?
That's one of the main points I make in Only the Strong. I first conceived of it after the Afghanistan fiasco last year. So many Arkansans asked me, how could this happen? How could we lose to a medieval band of savages there? And it was similar to the questions I've had over the years. How could we allow BLM riders to rampage in our streets and tear down statues of our heroes like Washington and Lincoln and Grant? Or how could we allow teachers' unions to indoctrinate our kids with radical ideologies? This decline that Americans sense is not by accident. It is decline by design. The progressive left is, at best, ambivalent about America and openly hostile, therefore, to the sources of American power. Strong military, a free, prosperous economy, sovereign borders, and sovereign freedom of action in the world. Whether strong law enforcement at home. These are the things that they actively try to undermine, and it's causing the problems that you see in America today. And it's going to cause their defeat next week at the election as well.
Yeah. As a combat veteran who served in the Army, you've got a very unique take on the current state of our military. And I want to read an excerpt to the audience from the chapter that you call Neutering the Military. And it reads in part, Democrats have habitually slashed funding for the military, setting back vital efforts to train and equip our troops. Democrats also feel unease about the military and its customs and culture, leading them to subject our troops to misguided policies and priorities. Tell me what specifically you mean that they have done in these areas.
Well, first off, it's almost like birds migrating south for the winter. Anytime a Democrat comes into office, they always slash the defense budget. It's been worse in recent years with people like Bill Clinton and Barack Obama in office, but it goes back to the pre-World War II era as well. Even with supposedly tough Democrats like Harry Truman, they cut defense to the bone. Second, Democrats just have a mistrustful relationship with the military and its personnel and its culture. You saw this in President Obama's first year in office, when he believed, egged on in no small part by then Vice President Biden, that the military was trying to box him in on Afghanistan, was feeding him information that didn't comport with reality. But you also see it in the United States Senate. Many of my colleagues would have you believe that the military is full of sexual predators and racists and extremists, when in reality, if you look at the data, you're much safer in the military than you are on a college campus. And the military is one of the most meritocratic societies in our country. In fact, the military was integrated barely a year after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball. And still today, minorities are a greater share of our military than they are a percentage of our population. It is the ultimate meritocracy in our society. It's not a place where you have systemic racism or prejudice hiding behind sharp creases and spit-shine shoes.
Senator, foreign policy is a big focus of your book. You specifically focus on the China threat. I want to read just a portion of what you say. You say, though Joe Biden is no one's idea of a strategic mastermind, his impulsive and reckless approach to foreign policy may be even worse, and Biden has done next to nothing to protect Americans from our greatest threat, communist China. You talk about how Obama, when he was president, saw China as a partner, and he put then Vice President Biden in charge of the relationship. Why has he done nothing, in your opinion? Is there a fundamental misunderstanding of the threat that China poses? I mean, is he naive to this, or is he emboldened to them?
I do think that progressives like Barack Obama and Joe Biden simply can't understand the mindset of aggressive nationalist dictators like Xi Jinping in China or Vladimir Putin in Russia. John Kerry famously said when Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine the first time, that you don't just invade another country in 19th century fashion in the 21st century. Well, apparently someone forgot to tell Vladimir Putin that. And we live in a dangerous world. Well, that is unfortunately exactly what happens in too many places. And you have to be able to understand the mindset of those kind of aggressive nationalist leaders in places like China and Russia if you want to protect America's interests and to defend us. And Joe Biden in particular has been wrong about China almost his entire career. I mean, 30 years ago when he was a senator, he supported, in fact, was a leader in the effort to give them permanent most favored nation status, which cost us millions of jobs and thousands of factories, and then admitting them to the World Trade Organization on the idea that they would follow the international trading rules and we'd all become better off, when in reality, they ripped us off for 2 decades ever since. Even on the campaign trail in 2020, he was still saying that communist China is not a competitor to us and that they're not bad folks. It's an example of where he's not just a dove, but he's kind of an ostrich as well, where he sticks his head in the sand and doesn't realize that China is waging a Cold War against America in many of the same ways that he refused to accept that Soviet Russia was waging a Cold War against us during the actual Cold War.
Well, there's so much more to discuss, Senator. So if you'd stay right there, we'll have you back right after the break to continue to talk about how we can fix our military and how Republicans can win back the Senate.